Welcome back to the
All
Dream
right.
Stream. This is Paul Sheldon from Dreamosophy, and today we're exploring the art of fundraising, specifically the 7 questions. And I'd like to start by just asking you, how has what we've discussed so far impacted you? What has this provoked in you? How are these issues and concerns showing up in your life, your projects, your dreams? And Mark was just sharing what I thought was a delightful perspective. Mark, do you mind if I ask you to repeat yourself?
I will do my best. I'm accustomed to being behind the camera, not in front of it. So I'll do my best. But I also, in fact, made a living for many years doing documentaries where first take was the best take. Because when you ask somebody about something that they're passionate about, they're always going to give you the right answer the first time, because that's what they're all about. And all I was saying in this context was that I'm appreciating the fact that since most of us are loners that are taking on this process, it's nice to be able to have a consistent opportunity, even for a few days, with some other like-minded people in a similar way to what we once had in the corporate world, which again, as I said before, we grumbled about, but it was a nice feature because yeah, you could get people in a room and discuss a subject and then walk away with your head full of ideas and see what was going to happen next.
Thank you. Amy, Arlene, any comments?
Well, just pretty much saying, I had put in the chat boxes that basically just kind of build a relationship with others and find out what they are passionate about and what's important to them. And I think from there, you can find a way to share what you're passionate about, and then possibly, ask for some donation or some support.
Lovely.
Yeah, I've been thinking back on the people I want to talk with and thinking about how I want to approach each of them and imagining like going to where they're at. And because I'm always thinking, I want people to come and see the shop, and I do, but it might be good, relationship building wise and just to reconnect with people to go to them. So I'll kind of have to carve out some time and like go and visit where they're at and have, offer to come to them and have lunch and coffee or whatever. And I'm looking forward to that. I'm just thinking about where I'm going to find the time.
And one of those great indicators of area and level of interest is who pays for lunch. If they buy lunch, it's a really good sign.
That's a good one. Thank you.
It's like, who's asking the questions? Well, let's dive in then. We have been talking about this topic of being interested, not interesting. And part of that is about listening. And so Dreamosophy has developed this 7 questions approach, which is really a conversation starter. It's about how do you create a context for your being able to listen that is easy for people to talk into. First of all, I apologize. I didn't get the videos up on time. I was busy dealing with my own health emergency yesterday, but they're now up on LinkedIn, and here's some links to the videos on Google Drive and YouTube so that you can review if you want to. And the first link here, which I may be able to put into the chat, is to the overview of the 7 questions, which is posted in the LinkedIn group. And let me just go get that and put it in the chat for people who want to take a look at this while we're talking. The 7 questions is derived from the work of Irving Warner, the author of The Art of Fundraising. and he was very, very interested in being interested. And so we talked yesterday about the 7 C's, this cycle of creative dreaming that proceeds from confluent intuition to creative imagination, careful intention, conscious attention, concerted action, calm reflection, and consistent gratitude. How do we manifest that in our conversations with somebody who's a prospective investor or donor or supporter of what you're doing? The 7 questions is designed as a cascading sequence of topics for discussion. And you ask these questions not like you're doing a survey. This is not an interview where you're going out and doing a person in their office interview and you're trying to collect data. I usually do not take notes while I'm talking with people, except for the names and contact information they give me, because we want this to be a relaxed, informal conversation. And I can't say enough that the purpose of this is not to collect data. We're not trying to get information. Just as when you're talking about your project with someone for the first or second time, your purpose is not to inform, but to inspire. And oftentimes people miss that. They're trying to be so meticulous about giving all the information that people need. And it's really about getting people in touch with what they care about and what they're enthusiastic about. And you do that not by informing people, but by inspiring them, by telling stories and little vignettes. So the 7 questions proceeds through this sequence from how did you first hear about us? And this is even if you're with somebody that you've known for a long time, you can say to them, I know we've known each other for 15 years, but I always love to hear the beginning first. So what do you remember about the first time that we met? Or what do you remember about the first time I told you about this project or this company or this organization? And then drawing them out about, in the past, have you invested in similar organizations, or have you donated to, you could adjust the wording according to your own context. But the point is to get them to tell you the story of how they have supported similar activities or projects in the past. And then you move a little more deeply into what do you think of our current and proposed activities from what you know. And this is an interesting index of where you are in the process with people. If you can ask them, what do you think of our current and proposed activities? And they don't say, well, I don't know enough to have an opinion. Then you have somebody who knows enough about your organization to make an informed choice about whether or not they want to support you. If their answer is, well, I don't know enough, then stop right there and give them information, invite them for a tour, ask them what other organizations that are similar they know about and what do they think of those organizations. But assuming you're talking with somebody who does know about your organization, you've usually mailed them information or emailed them information in advance. And you can say, what do you think about the materials that I sent you? Once again, if they say, well, I haven't had a chance to look at it, that's an indication of a level of interest or availability, because everybody's busy these days. So this is an important transition point. And then, is there anything that our program is doing or proposing that you don't like? Is also a very important question, because if they have concerns that are going to stop them from being able to support you, then that's going to be an issue. Then a similar way of asking that same question is, are there any projects or activities we should be doing that we currently aren't? And some of you have heard me talk about some of the times when this has been a pivotal question. For example, when we were starting the Rocky Mountain Institute in Colorado, my former wife was a teacher at the Aspen Community School, which was on land belonging to George Stranahan, who had several thousand acres of ranch land near Aspen. And she suggested that I go talk to him. So I did. And he said, no, I'm not really interested, but you should talk to my brother. So I went to talk to his brother, Michael, who lives in the Woody Creek trailer park, or did at the time, down where Hunter Thompson used to hang out in Aspen. And he said in answer to this question, I don't think that I could comment on that, because if I got that involved, I'd end up taking over, like I'd want to be running the board. And that was a really interesting opening. He eventually did agree to come sit on the board and help raise the first $1 million. And there's some other stories we can tell about that. But another example is Saul Baker from Southern California. When Irving Warner and I were the Weizmann Institute of Science Los Angeles committee for supporting the Weizmann Institute of Science in Israel, we went to see Saul Baker. And when we asked him that question, are there any projects or activities we should be doing that we currently aren't? He said, well, absolutely, you're not doing enough to support the security of Israel. Kind of prophetic that this conversation was 45 years ago. And it came out that what he wanted was to endow a chair in security studies, and he wanted to put up $1 million to make that happen. So this question of what are we not doing can open up a lot of possibilities. Obviously, you have to decide whether or not you want to do it. And then the next question is, if we were to undertake such a project or activity, would you provide funding or help? And with Saul Baker, he said, yes, I would absolutely put up $1 million to endow a chair in security studies. Now, the backside of that is, he said, I want my gift to be announced at a dinner at the Century Plaza Hotel, and I want Henry Kissinger to be the keynote speaker, which was kind of interesting, but we were able to do that. And so we ended up raising $2 million because of the surrounding events that were going on there. And once you've gotten through this sequence of 6 questions, then you end up into this question: if you were asked, would you join the board? And there's lots of ways to ask this question. If you were asked, would you join a fundraising committee? If you were asked, would you join an advisory board? If you were asked, would you help us design the foundation for the building that we're building? Whatever is appropriate for the person that you're talking with. And then asking them at what level is really important, because if this is somebody who's likely to give you $100, they'll tell you. And if it's somebody that's likely to give you $1 million, they'll tell you that. Or they'll say, well, I don't know, why don't you just ask for what you need and then we'll talk. And if someone says that, then you do your homework about what kind of gifts they've done in the past, or what kind of investments they've made in the past. I was talking with a wonderful man in Arizona about entertainment facility that he has, and he told me exactly how much he had invested on his last attraction, which says how much he's capable of. That doesn't say necessarily what he's going to do for us, but when I get to how much would you like to invest with us, that's an important question, and we'll talk about that a lot more tomorrow. But I want to pause for a minute here and get into the philosophy behind the 7 questions. And Mark, I wonder if I could call on you to read the first paragraph that's on the screen, if the type is large enough for your view.
Just read it?
Yeah, just read what's there. Just the first
read it out?
paragraph. Yep. Starting with
Originally developed by Irving. You want me to read that out loud is what you're asking me?
Yes, please.
Is that correct?
Yeah,
okay.
Just so
all
you
right.
don't get tired of hearing my voice.
You can get tired of hearing mine too. Originally developed by Irving R. Warner, as published in his 1975 book, The Art of Fundraising, and further refined by Irving Warner's former assistant and friend, Paul Sheldon. The 7 questions has evolved over 40 years of practice to provide a carefully designed sequence of conversation topics that can be completed all at the same time in as little as 15 minutes, or over a period of weeks, months, or even years. How long it takes to complete all the topics included in the 7 questions depends on the readiness and relative familiarity of the prospective supporter with regard to the organization or project. Mas?
That making sense? Any questions or comments?
The little bits and pieces.
Yes, bit at a time. Amy, may I call on you to read that second paragraph?
Sure thing. Let's see. Can I see it? Yeah, we could also refer to the sequence as the 7 topics or 7 archways or doorways, because the purpose of the questions is to bring up specific topics in ways that invite the prospective supporter to consider various aspects of the process of becoming a major supporter. Each topic is like walking through a trellised archway into a new area of the garden of dreams. Move slowly and take the time to smell the roses.
Thank you. And I want to comment on this just a little bit, because when we cultivate relationship rather than a transaction, when the purpose of our conversation is to draw the two of us closer in the flow of our dream stream towards the realization of our fondest dreams, moving slowly is very important. And it's okay to take time for these topics. It also can go very quickly. I've done this in 10 minutes at a cocktail party, gone through all 7 questions with someone. And knowing what level they're going to be as a supporter helps a lot, because when you've had 20 or 30 of these conversations with people, you get a sense of the landscape. When we consider the world of investing, world of making donations to philanthropic activities and projects, as I mentioned the other day, most of that support comes from individuals, especially in the nonprofit area or the non-governmental organizations, but also in venture capitalism as well. With nonprofits, the statistics haven't changed in 50 years. 85% of charitable giving comes from individuals. The other 15% is the foundations and government grants and institutional giving, corporate sponsorship, and that sort of thing. But within that realm of charitable giving, 85% of dollars given charitably are given to religion, healthcare, and alma mater. So if you're doing something other than building a hospital treatment program or building a daycare center or supporting a school or raising money for a church or spiritual institution, then you're going after, if you're looking to foundations and corporations and government grants, you're going after 15% of 15%. So it's a very small section of all the money that's available. And that's why I urge people to start first with individuals. And Mara was on the call yesterday, and I used the phrase FF&F, which is a colloquialism for family, friends, and fools. At the level of startup, we often find that it's family members, it's friends or friends of our family members, and then the people who are speculative and willing to step outside the box. I once invested $100,000 in an eco-village in St. Louis, because even though I had just met these people, they were referred by a friend whom I met through a friend, and I could tell the integrity of the project in the first 15 minutes, and I was happy to help them get over a hurdle. But that's rare. Mostly it's people that you know, or people to whom you've been referred by someone who has influence over you. You care about them and you trust them. So that's why we focus on these 7 questions, because it's an approach to developing conversations with individuals. Now, does grant fundraising work? Absolutely. Should you not write any proposals to foundations or government grants because I told you to use the 7 questions? No, it's both and situation. But if we think about the amount of money that we can get from a proposal, most of the foundations and venture capitalists will give small amounts first and large amounts later. But individuals will often make a much larger contribution. And generally, a first-time gift is going to be $10,000 or less. But sometimes it happens the other way. So it's fine for you to start with individuals while you're also working on proposals and developing relationships with corporations. So I just wanted to go on a little bit more into the specifics of the 7 questions as a context for having these conversations. They're not a request or a solicitation of funds, and we're going to talk more about this tomorrow. They're designed to precede any request or solicitation of funds by asking various questions that give an indication of how well the prospective supporter knows the organization or the project. And what I mean by this is, in raising capital, raising funds for nonprofit projects, hybrid projects, typically 60 to 80% of the money comes from between 1 and 3 individuals. If you're going to be successful when you start out, you need those core supporters. Golden Rule Reentry in Medford struggled for 2 years until they received a $300,000 grant from the state of Oregon. That got them up over the challenge of having an office and developing a program. So getting one source identified is really important. And it may not be an individual. It may be a grant program or an angel investment group or firm. But how do you know that? How well does what you're doing match what they really care about and what they like and don't like about your organization or project? And what we're going to talk about tomorrow is, how do you ask for money? Or more importantly, how do you not ask for money? Because I prefer to ask people how they feel rather than asking them to do something. And so for those who are already familiar with and supportive of your project or your organization, the process of introducing each of these sequential topics by means of these questions can move along smoothly, kind of like wandering through a garden in a leisurely manner. And not all these questions are appropriate for every prospective supporter. So if you already have a chairperson in place and they've committed to raise, say, half the money that you need, then you're not going to ask somebody else if they're going to chair your fundraising committee. It's not necessary to ask someone to serve on the board if you don't want them on your board. So once again, you're going to adapt these questions for your own use. And for many of us this week, we're starting from a place where the people with whom we're going to be speaking don't know much about our organization. So it's important to go smoothly and gradually and not jump to asking them for money until they know what you're doing. So Amy, for example, you're going to be meeting with people. If they don't know about your organization, you go through maybe the first 3 or 4 questions to find out who they are, and you go through facting and asking them about their projects and their background. Have a good time getting to know them, then invite them to visit the shop and finish out the 7 questions once they've been to the shop and they know more about what you're doing. Does that make sense?
Yeah. That's good. I've been inviting people to come and visit, and this is a good shift mindset.
Yeah, it's a
No.
it's a nonverbal physical drama. It's like physical theater, where part of the presentation is people doing backflips and swinging from fabric from the ceiling and whatever. The physical territoriality of going to them on their turf shows them that you're interested. It shows them that you care about who they are and what they're doing. And also it gives you a chance to see what is the context of their work. So if I'm going to see an architect and I go to his house and I see that it's an 8,000 square foot house up on the hill overlooking the town, that tells me a lot about how much this person could support us if they wanted to. If you go to see them and they're in their shared apartment with their roommates and you have to go to the corner coffee shop to find a place where you can talk, that also tells you a lot about who this person is, what this person is capable of. Now, don't hang your hat on that. Michael Stranahan, whom I mentioned earlier, lived in a trailer in the Woody Creek Trailer Park and drove an old Honda Civic, and his favorite activity was making Indian fry bread in a cast iron skillet. But he also owned Champion spark plugs. And so he was able to give us $150,000 letter of credit to get the Rocky Mountain Institute building built and help chair the first $1 million campaign. So don't entirely judge people by the kind of car they drive or the kind of house they live in. But the point is that you're asking them for their advice, and to get them to know as much as you can about your organization is less important than you finding out as much as you can about what they do and what they care about. Listening is the purpose of these conversations. So you ask these questions and then you stop talking. They're not designed to be gathering data. You're trying to deepen a relationship between your project and the donor. And you introduce these topics in very gentle ways. As I love this analogy of wandering through the garden of possibilities. And that is what enables you to move gradually and intuitively through this sequence of topics. So I'm going to stop here and ask you to share about some conversations that you have had with people about becoming prospective supporters, and how do you feel this rhythm with regard to asking people questions and letting them talk and listening? What's that like for you? And you can just unmute and start talking, or I can call on you.
I mean, kind of like what I was saying, like, I like that this is giving me some guidance, because yeah, I think I've been making the mistake of being interesting. Like, look how interesting is this that I'm doing. And I love listening to people, and I love, and I think I just get caught in, like, kind of a pressure loop. Like I have a goal in mind, so I'm not like backing up and thinking of the bigger picture.
Mm-hmm. And that's not a mistake.
Yeah,
Everybody does that to start. and it's not that it doesn't work.
Yeah,
you are
people
interesting. People
right.
love what you're doing.
They
So
do. It's good.
there's nothing wrong with inviting somebody in and telling them all about what you're doing and asking them if and how they want to support you. It works.
Yeah.
Where it gets a little more difficult is when you're reaching out to people that you don't know, who know about what you're doing through an intermediary, and you've never met them. And if you dominate that conversation by talking about you and your stuff, it's not as effective as being interested in them. And I'll give you one example of this. One of the groups I was raising money for many years ago was invited to the Caribbean island of a billionaire potential supporter. And they were building a building. The people who were trying to raise money were building a building, and they were looking to raise money to build the building. And they went to this guy's island at his expense. He flew them down there, and they went into this 400-year-old Spanish fort with 4-foot thick walls that he stayed in when he was on his island. And they immediately went into his dining room and laid out all the plans for their building, and spent the whole time that they were together talking about their building and the plans. And they never once asked him about the building they were in. And when I went to talk with him a few months later about becoming a supporter of this project, he said, "Nope, I'm not interested. This guy is a techno-twit with no social skills. He spent his whole time here talking about his project, and he never once asked me about my house." Wow. Now, not everybody's that mean-spirited, but that's kind of an extreme example of the pitfall of being too interesting without being interested and without allowing time to listen. So yeah. I think you'll find that you'll have some fun as you go through this process enough times that it becomes familiar for you, so that it really provides like a trellis on which a rose can grow, where asking these questions opens up conversations where you get to listen. And it's actually much less effort to listen than it is to try to control the conversation.
That's so true. Nice.
Mark, tell me about talking with people in ways that get them to talk so that you can listen.
You know, it's interesting. I was just reflecting on what you were saying about this. You know, first of all, yeah, you can't judge people by what car they drive, how much money they got in the bank. I guarantee you that. I know a lot of folks in New Mexico that look like they don't have a dime and they've got billions. But maybe it's because everything is very provincial in so much of the West. You kind of learn what you're talking about naturally because you either get reception or you don't.
Yeah.
If you walk into a gallery and you start talking about, I've got this great magazine and you should be in it, I'm not going to get the ad. It's as simple as that. But if I look around and I see what's on the walls, which is the whole reason that we're there, and when we talk about this piece of art or this artist or the person who owns the gallery, how long have they owned the gallery? Small galleries, and just like every other small business, they're very proud of the time that they've been in business. Those are the things you instantly have a connection with them.
Yeah.
And then from there, and then from there, you can tell whether you're going to have a further conversation. You know, as I
Yes.
said, I've been turned off cold no matter what. They know I'm fishing. But you know what? That's a funny thing too, with the water right behind you there. Yeah, it is fishing. They call it fishing, not catching. And so sometimes it sounds dishonest, but it's not. You know, if you go up to the girl and you go, "Hey, do you want to go out?" and she slaps you in the face, that's probably an answer. Ask the next one.
Well said. There is an aspect of the 7 questions that is not about asking questions or getting answers. It's about cultivating relatedness. So I have a homework assignment for you. And Amy, you've already had this homework assignment. And that is to find somebody with whom you can practice the 7 questions conversation. Not somebody that's your prospective $1 million contributor with whom you're only going to get one chance, but somebody you know well enough to say, hey, I'm going through this course, The Art of Fundraising, and I need to practice a conversation with someone. Would you be willing to give me 15 minutes where I can ask you some questions? And just practice asking the 7 questions, because it's much more effective when you have an intuitive sense of the flow of these 7 questions through a sequence. Being able to do that with your notes in front of you, with someone that you know and trust, who's not going to tell you to go away because you had a cheat sheet that you were using, is a great way to get comfortable. You can also do it with the mirror, where you ask yourself the 7 questions, and it's always fun to do that too. But the point is to get comfortable with the sequence so that when you have an opportunity to have a conversation with someone, and I mentioned the other day this sequence that I had with a man who was the executive director of a foundation while I was driving to Portland on Interstate 5, and we got disconnected 5 times. And he kept calling me back, which was a great indication that he really was interested, that we got through the 7 questions. And he eventually did become $1 million donor. If you have it as a conversation rather than as an interview, it's much easier to manage the flow of that conversation. So that's my recommendation for you for between now and tomorrow. Find somebody with whom you can practice these 7 questions about your project, because each of you has a fascinating project. So that's the 7 questions. What questions do you have about this 7 questions approach? What feels right to you? What feels odd to you? What are you wondering about? sounds like I've given an eloquent presentation, which has covered everything you ever wondered about, and you understand it and are satisfied. Lovely.
Perfect.
Actually, I was thinking about pitching this to somebody I know who is a multi-gazillionaire, because I actually know a few of those people, and I've never pitched anything like this to any of them because it's a funny thing, and this is probably one of the breakthroughs that I need to get. Is it's too easy because I know these people pretty well. I actually worked in their homes. I've seen them, making millions and doing strange things, and yet they would be the ones I would go to in that community for support. Always second guessing what their response would be before we ask the question, which is kind of fatalistic.
Say that last part again.
Not uncommon. I said it's kind of fatalistic.
Yes. And say more about that.
Well, I'm just saying, because there's no point in presupposing, there's a saying in sales that says never leave something on the table if you know it's there. And it's the same thing. But if you're never going to approach the person to begin with because you're assuming that there's going to be answers going to be no, that's an old sales problem.
Right.
But it's always an old sales problem.
Yes. And what's the difference between raising capital for an enterprise and sales?
Actually, there is a difference. There's a big difference, because depending on what you're selling, if I sell you my product and it doesn't sell off the shelves, you don't buy it again. That's the end of that. And making an investment decision with other people's money usually involves some kind of ownership, and so you're giving up more that way. So that, who you want to be in bed with is a decision too.
Yeah.
Hi,
so
Amy.
Say again, what's the difference?
I'm not sure if I understand what you mean by that.
So what's the difference between selling a product and soliciting support for a capital project?
I mean, maybe I'll,
The engagement
right.
is the way I see it.
Okay, Amy, you want to comment on that?
I mean, it might be that, when, you sell your product to someone who needs it, right? Or for whom it would, whatever you're making would be helpful, but you may not be seeking, capital funding from that same person, like from people who actually, like, I don't need any shirts, but I'd love to help,
Right.
that's my thought, but.
I appreciate that answer. So the difference is, in a sales process, you're going in with an idea in mind where you want to sell somebody a widget. When you're soliciting an investor, you're going in engaging in a creative process that has to involve what they care about and what they're looking for. Now, if you have a shirt shop and they walk into your shirt shop, it's a pretty good clue that they might be looking for a shirt. But the 7 questions are not designed to get somebody to do something. They're designed to find out what they are motivated to do. What are they inspired by? And is there a confluence? It's very rare that we're able to get somebody who's not interested in what we're doing to invest.
Right.
They may buy a hat because they like you. But if it's a $5,000 or $10,000 or $5 or $10 million investment that we're talking about, they're probably not going to do that just because they like you. They're going to do it because they care about what you're doing, or because they want to make money and you're offering them an opportunity to make money, whatever the inspiration is. My experience with products and raising money to get products to market is that the people who invest are people who like the person who's creating the project and the people who love the product. The myth of startup funding coming from random capital investors who have money burning a hole in their pocket and just want to invest it somewhere is not commonplace in the world of raising funds for startup enterprises. So we're looking for an approach here that's going to open up the possibility of a relationship with somebody who cares. There is another aspect that I don't always talk about, but I'm going to talk about today because we have a little bit of extra time, and that is serendipity. It's the intuitive confluence. And confluence is the word that I use to describe what Carl Jung called synchronicity. It's more than connection. It's more than coincidence. It's a serendipitous coincidence. Like, oh my goodness gracious, we went to the same high school, or our birthdays are the same, or really, you were just talking about this yesterday? And it cannot be underestimated how often that happens. How often, Mara was here yesterday and we were talking about people with autism and people who are neurodiverse, and how likely it is that the people who support what she's doing are going to be people who know someone or have a child or a sibling or the child of a friend who's dealing with issues of neurodiversity, who are going to be her investors. And we can't predict that because in something like neurodiversity, it's not something that people put on their Facebook page. I mean, sometimes they do, but it's not going to show up in their LinkedIn bio that they have a child or a relative or a friend of a friend who's dealing with issues of neurodiversity. It's the same thing with people who are formerly incarcerated or trying to reform the prison system. People don't put out there that that's what they want to be dealing with, but when it comes up, they go, oh yeah, you know, my daughter got arrested for drugs a couple of years ago and it was her first offense and yada yada yada, and they gave her 13 years, and that really matters to me. You find that out by accident, but we call that confluence. We're listening for confluence between what people care about and what you're already doing, and sometimes that happens in a magical way, in a mystical way that you couldn't have predicted. And so that's one of the reasons that I recommend doing these conversations with as many people as possible, because the more times you have the 7 questions conversation, the more likely it is that you'll find somebody who you didn't know, the person who referred you to them didn't know that they had this concern. And that's the confluence that we're looking for, because you have this sense that there might be something there, but you don't know what it is. And they have the same sense. And then when you find out, then there's an overlap, and that becomes the kind of thing that really works. I'll just give the example. Amy, you probably remember this from the Thomas J. Long Foundation. We didn't know who they were. They were a Canvas team stop. Patrick was outside the health food store in El Cerrito. And this guy came out of the store in a hustle bustle hurry. And Patrick did his pitch about planting justice. And he had his notebook, and I want to tell you about planting justice. And it's a really great program. And the guy said, I don't have time to talk now. And he's walking to his car. And Patrick walked with him to his car, trying to do his pitch all the way to the car. And the guy was polite, but distracted and hurried. And finally, as he's getting into his Mercedes convertible sports car, he says to Patrick, well, here's my card. Have somebody call me. And the card said, Executive Director, Thomas J. Long Foundation. And Patrick got all excited and called me right away and said, "What do I do? This guy's the executive director." And of course, the guy just drove off, and that was it.
Right.
And Patrick said, "What do I do? What do I do? I don't know what to do." He's the president of the foundation. And I said, "Well, first of all, he's not the president. He's the executive director. That's fine. He's the staff person, but it's a wonderful contact. Take a cell phone photo of it and send it to me, and I'll take it from here." And that was the guy that I called while I was on the way to Portland.
Oh,
Took
wow.
so much work. And where the confluence came in was, we didn't know, and it wasn't on GuideStar and it wasn't on their website, that the Thomas J. Long Foundation was created by Thomas J. Long, who founded Long's Drugs, and he died. And a lot of his money was left to the foundation, but a lot of his money was also left to his kids. And the money in the foundation was dedicated to ending hunger in Contra Costa County and Alameda County. And his kids didn't want to be bothered. They decided that they had enough money. They didn't want to be bothered with the foundation. They had $90 million and they had vowed to spend it down. They were going to give away all the money to ending hunger in Contra Costa and Alameda counties. So then the conversation shifted dramatically when we found that out, because Planting Justice is working to end hunger in Contra Costa and Alameda counties. And it got to be very easy to set up an opportunity for them to come visit and to see what we're doing. And that was another one of those interesting moments where he said, he said, "You should send us a proposal," after they had visited. And I said, "Okay, how much should we ask for?" I mean, we're talking 10,000, 100,000, $1 million. He said, "Just ask for what you need." So we asked for $1 million. And they board discussed it, and they came back to us and said, "Well, we've never worked with you before, and so we don't feel comfortable giving you $1 million to start, but how about we give you $250,000 a year for 3 years, and then we can talk about what else to do." And that came out of a canvas stop on the street. Now, it's not entirely coincidental, because at that point we had talked to somewhere between 30 and 60,000 people with our street canvas. And so if you take a random group of 30,000 people at a basketball stadium or in a football stadium and go around, you're likely to find an executive director of a foundation. But nonetheless, that confluence of their organizational mission and what we were doing was too good to be true, except that it was true. And it was wonderful. So that's what you're cultivating for with the numbers game of talking to as many people as you can in order to identify unanticipated confluences. And you can't expect the first person you talk with to be that person. I mean, you can expect it. It's fine to get up in the morning and expect that every day, but just looking at the statistics and the patterns, the more people you talk with, the more likely you are to find those confluences. As we slide into our VIP session, for folks who are watching the video, because everybody who's here today is already in the VIP session, I do want to say that you will be getting emails and text messages inviting you to join our VIP group. And it would be great if you did. We don't mind your coming in late. The sessions are wonderful anyway. And if you have any questions about that, please let me know. I need to take a 4 or 5 minute bio break. And so I'm going to leave my camera on, but sorry, I'm going to take my camera off, but leave the Zoom call open. And I will be back on the hour, and we can continue with specifics about what's happening with your projects.
Nice. Thank you.